Good morning. This is Friday morning in beautiful sunny California. Tanya Freedman on the line. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Kinetics, and I have with me a very esteemed legal panel who are here very graciously giving up their time to give you some information about the immigration of Canadian nurses to the US. And we have both Jacob Sapochnick and Carl Shusterman, and I'm going to read out a little bit of a bio about them, and then we have some questions that have been sent through from people in this forum for this panel to answer. So first of all, a little bit about myself. I am an immigrant myself. I came to this country. Actually, yesterday was 19 years that I came to the US from South Africa many, many years ago. I'm now a proud American. But it was really important for me to, I wanted to share this information because I was an immigrant myself. I know how hard it is to come to the US. I know what a stressful process it can be. And it was really important to me as a recruitment company that bring Canadians and all other nationalities into the US to provide legal information for people who are coming here. So that's the reason why we actually started doing these Facebook Live sessions. We do many Facebook Live sessions in many different forums. I have with me Carl Shusterman, who is, and I'm going to read off a little bio about him, and then I'm going to also read off a short bio about Jacob Sapochnick as well. So Carl has been an immigration attorney for over 40 years. He served as a trial attorney for U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service from 1976 until 1982, when he entered the private practice of law. He's one of the very limited number of attorneys who have been designated as certified specialists in immigration and naturalization law. For more than 10 years, he's been voted one of the best lawyers in America as a super lawyer by his colleagues at the bar. He was featured in February 2018 issue of SuperLawyers Magazine, has been named one of the top 15 corporate immigration attorneys in the US. He has earned the highest rating in legal ability and ethics from the prestigious Martindale-Hubbell Legal Directory, and served as a member of the Immigration and Nationality Law Advisory Commission for the State Bar. He's listed in the international who's who of corporate immigration lawyers. And so we can see we have the real deal here today. We also have Jacob Sapochnick, very esteemed lawyer. He's the managing attorney of the law offices of Jacob Sapochnick and is an active member of the Immigration Lawyers Association. He's invited to lecture on immigration law topics at various conferences all over the US and abroad. He's published various articles on issues related to the field. He provides immigration law support to US immigration clients worldwide. He's a founder of Find Jobs USA, one of the first job search sites focused on international workers seeking employment in the US. He's been featured by newspapers, TV outlets, CNN Money, ESPN, NBC News, ABC, Fox, the ABBA Journal, KPBS, just to name a few. And he has written articles for various publications in North America. He's a pioneer in social media engagement in the legal world. He graduated from Manchester Metropolitan University of Law with a Bachelor of Law, and he also attended California Western Law School of Law in San Diego and obtained his LLM Master's degree in International and Comparative Law. So everybody watching, this is the real deal. This is your chance to ask questions of the legal experts. And I know we have many people who have asked, who have sent through questions to me from the group that really want to find out how to come to the US if they are Canadian citizens. So for anybody who is watching us live, please write into the chat box and tell us where you are, where you're from, and please feel free to share this Facebook Live session with your friends and colleagues, because we want to make sure that we get the information out and answer all of your questions. And before I forget, I wanted to also just thank David Salcedo, the admin for this forum, who has given us the opportunity to do this Facebook Live session. So to start off, I think we start off with the very basic questions. So Carl, what is the TN? Can you explain what the TN actually is?
Okay, so the United States and Mexico and Canada have an agreement called NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and it has a list of over 60 professionals categories. We have it listed on our website, and it's on other websites as well. It's called a Trade NAFTA Visa, a TN visa. And if somebody gets a job offer in the United States and they're in one of those occupations, their U.S. employer can sponsor them to come and work in the U.S. on the temporary visa. When NAFTA started, it used to be a one year at a time, and now it's 3 years at a time. It's a great opportunity because for a lot of professions, if you're from another country or not from Canada or Mexico, you have to get a H-1B visa, and those are limited numerically. So there's a lottery once a year, every April, and your chances are less than 50% to qualify for that. But if you're a Canadian or Mexican, there's no lottery, there's no numerical limits. And it's just so much easier to be able to qualify to come to work in the U.S. than if you're from any other country. And one other thing I'd like to mention is that it doesn't mean you have to be born in Canada or Mexico. You can be from any country in the world, but once you become a citizen of Canada or Mexico, you qualify for a TN visa.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I wanted to add one thing. The beautiful thing about the TN is that you don't have to apply for this visa at the U.S. Embassy. You can apply for it at the port of entry. So that's a beautiful thing for Canadian nurses. Mexican nurses still have to go to the embassy, but Canadian nurses can just have their application ready and apply at the port of entry, which is perfect. You can start working within a day.
Yeah, it really is so much simpler. It's also much cheaper. Yeah. So we bring nurses from all over the world, and obviously they have to come on a green card. But I think just the simplicity and the cost and the ease of the TN visa is really very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
So one question that we have from Maria is she is an RN. She was originally from the Philippines, and so she was an RN in the Philippines, but she is not an RN in Canada. So the question that she has is, does she qualify for the TN?
She does qualify for the TN as long as she gets an RN license in the United States. It's not necessary that she has that she's a licensed RN in Canada, only that she's a Canadian citizen. The fact that she completed her, I assume she completed her BSN degree in the Philippines is fine, and she gets a license in California or some other state. She doesn't need to qualify. We get that question all the time. You don't need to have an RN license in Canada.
So the thing is, if you look at the NAFTA requirements, but the beautiful thing about it is they say either a nursing degree from Canada or a state provisional license, and that's the beauty part. So just like Carl said, if there is no degree, if there is no license from Canada, they can still get a U.S. Degree and come here.
Yeah, and from our side, we have clients all over the U.S. Both acute care hospitals and nursing homes. We do direct hire. And we have many, even our nursing homes, we have many facilities that will take nurses who are actually working as health aides. They're not even working as an RPN or an LPN in Canada. They're working as health aides. Sometimes they haven't even worked as a nurse because of the way that the registration in Canada is set up, where it's really so difficult to get the RN. But as long as they're an RN, and they have passed the NCLEX, obviously, then that's going to be a key. So, okay, we're starting to get quite a few questions coming in. Okay, so we have one that was sent through to us in the chat bot, and it is it was actually sent in confidential. So Milanis from our team has posted it. She said, this person said, I'm a Canadian citizen, married, no dependent. I passed the NCLEX already, currently practicing in emergency department, willing to move to the US to practice there. So here are the questions. Will my spouse have work permission while I'm on the work visa? Jacob, if you want to take.
So unfortunately, TN visas, the TD, which is a dependent of a TN, they're not eligible for a work permit. So unlike an E-visa, for example, an E2 visa, or some H-1B visas down the line when they get a work permit after the green card, TN visas are not eligible for spouse work permits at the moment.
Yeah, so the spouse can go with you, but they cannot work unless I have one of the occupations that's on the list for the TN list of occupations.
So they can join them on a TD visa as a dependent, as well as the kids under 21, but they're not able to get a work permit just because they're dependents.
Okay. The second question that she has is, can we upgrade the work visa to a green card after a while? If yes, how long should we stay in the US under work visa? Carl.
So yes, we have many TN nurses who are in the process of applying for green cards, and the good news, especially for Filipinos who the waiting time to get a green card, if we would have had this seminar 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said, yes, you can do it, but it will take you 7 or 8 years to get a green card. On Monday this week, on July 1st, 2019, the waiting time went down to 0 for Filipino nurses for the first time that I can remember. And I don't know how long it'll stay this way, but it's certainly a lot less, than it was in the past. So but one very important caveat about that, the TN is called the single entry visa. So, I mean, if you go to a port of entry and you say, oh, I'd like to stay permanently in the United States, they will not let you into the US because the TN is supposed to go back to Canada or to Mexico. However, there is a memo online from immigration so that if you come here on a TN and you like your job and it's a few months down the line, your employer can sponsor you for a green card. But if you're going back and forth between Canada and the US, on each entry, you have to be able to convince the immigration officer that you're not going to stay permanently in the US on that particular entry. So what we do for a lot of the nurses is we just arrange, instead of them for getting a green card in the US, there's another alternative. They can get a green card at the US consulate in Montreal, so that at none of their entries into the US, they're going to stay in the US. There's other alternatives. One's called adjustment of status as well, but that's not supposed to be what you intend to do when you come across the border.
So
exactly.
Jacob,
and also, the adjustment of status, sometimes they're stuck here for months, and so it's not always convenient.
So just to clarify, so from what I understand you're saying is that you could come in on the TN visa and after a few months you love your job and they love you and you decide that you want to stay, you can apply for a green card at that point. You just can't, you can't, isn't it called dual intent? You can't have dual intent, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that you can do an adjustment of status green card, which is where you're inside the US, or you can also do at that point a consulate green card where you would fly to Montreal and do the green card through the consular route, correct?
That's correct. And once, to go back to that question about your spouse and your kids being able to work, once you apply for adjustment of status, they will apply for adjustment of status, which is getting a green card in the US. And after about 6 months, they will get work permits. So while you're waiting for the green card interview, your spouse will be able to work after about 6 months.
Okay. So that brings me to a question that I actually got from one of our other nurses. Her name is Lorraine. So she has been working on a TN visa here in the US, actually in California, and she is now going to be doing her green card. She was deciding if she was going to be doing the consulate route or the adjustment of status route. How long would it take if, say, a nurse today said, okay, I've been here on the TN and I'm going to do the adjustment of status route, or I'm going to do the consular route? How long, as of today, because we know it's volatile and it's changing all the time, but as of today, would it take for either of those two different kinds of green cards?
But the adjustment of status varies according to the location where you are, or the nearest immigration office. It used to be that it was all done by paperwork and you were not interviewed. But about a year and a half, the present administration decided that employment-based immigrants for adjustment of status, should be interviewed. So on the uscis.gov page, you can look up to see what the waiting times are in a particular area. In Los Angeles, it's about a year to get an interview. Other places it's shorter. Some places it's longer than a year. It would be shorter to do it in Montreal, but I can tell you, as an immigration lawyer, when we're getting green cards for people through employment, we prefer to do it in the United States, especially if there's some issue, anything difficult about the green card, because you have a lot of due process rights. And if something would go wrong in the US, you have a lot of ways to appeal it, to renew that. If you go out of the country and they say no, there's no definite appeal system. So, it's up to the nurse, and we have got a lot of people green cards in Montreal, but my preference is to get it in the US. We just had somebody, they weren't actually a nurse, they were a therapist, and they were at one of our hospitals in El Centro, California, which is near the Mexican border. And they just went in a couple of days ago for their adjustment of status, and they got it, no problem. But if there had been a problem, we definitely would want the right to appeal it. And that would only happen if they're in the US.
Exactly. And I think that right now, if you file consular processing, it could be up to a year. But again, like Carl said, there's no control by the attorney or the employer in that process. There's no RFEs necessarily that we can respond to, or even have the attorney attend the interview. This is something that you can do in an adjustment of status process. The nurse can actually have the attorney be present there at the final adjustment of status interview, which we don't have in a consular interview. So.
Okay, so they're kind of pros and cons for each different scenario. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the confidential question. We covered that. Okay, since my in-laws live in California, are there also job opportunities around Orange County, Irvine? So the answer to that question is yes. We have many opportunities around Orange County, Irvine. The third part of the question, this is about employment. What is the minimum hourly salary that can be offered to an RN employed to the US? I can just maybe answer that question. So from our side, we are direct hire employers, which basically means that we don't sponsor you or hire you ourselves. We are what we call career matchmakers. So we introduce you to various acute care hospitals, nursing homes, rehab facilities, surgery centers, etc., all over the US. And it depends what they are paying in terms of their nurse salaries. So I can't really tell you what the minimum hourly salary would be, because it would depend on the organization. And just for you to know, from our side, we will, we handpick the facilities that we work with, because we want to make sure that the rates that you get are commensurate and equivalent to what an American nurse would get with the equivalent years of experience and education. The next part of this question, it came from Seppi. I apologize, Seppi. I thought it was confidential. The next part of the question is, what is the cost of the application process, the lawyer consultation, and the recruiting assists? So just from our side, there's no recruitment fee. We don't charge any recruitment fee. We get paid by the nurses. But Jacob, do you want to take that question in terms of the cost of the application and the lawyer's fees?
So, again, lawyers' fees, they vary, depends on who you go with. Some attorneys charge flat rates, some attorneys charge per hour. And again, it depends if it's an adjustment of status or a consular processing. If it's an adjustment of status, they have to pay for the I-140, which is about $700, and then another $1,200, something like that, for the adjustment. If it's consular, there's fees that are associated with the DS-260 and all the other costs down the line. So it varies, depends on what. And I don't want to quote attorneys' fees right now because we are recorded. So, but they vary.
And I want to point out that at least a lot of our hospital and healthcare clients, right, the employer will pick up all the fees because there's such a nurse shortage in the U.S. that for a lot of you won't pay 1 cent for the immigration process.
Right.
And it depends on the employer. So we have many employers that will pay for the full green card fee. We have some that don't pay for it. And we have some that will pay part of it and they require the nurse to pay part of it. So it just, I think there are no rules in terms of that. But pretty much there are two parts to the fee. I mean, you've got the government fees, which is a set amount, both from the adjustment status and the consulate route. And then you've got the lawyer's fees, as Jacob said, which is variable. Depends on the lawyer. Okay, so we have a question from Monmon, who asked, I have a pending EB3, second RFE already, though, with a sad face. So Monmon, hopefully your RFEs have been answered successfully. Next year, I'll be my third year. I will be on my third year working next year. Just in case the EB3 is still ongoing, can I still apply for the TN? Okay, so this is a question that we have had from some of our nurses. If they're working here in the US on a TN, they've applied for an EB3, but they're not, it doesn't look like the timelines, from the timelines that they're going to get it by the time that their TN expires. What happens then?
Okay, so it's that memo that I referred to before. As long, even if you've already been petitioned for a green card, and hopefully there's not an RFE in your case. In your case, there is. But as long as you can show that person at the border, the immigration agent, that you don't intend to stay permanently in the U.S. on that particular trip, the fact that you eventually want to get a green card won't stop you from getting a TN.
Correct. And we had extensions of TN beyond the third year, even beyond the 6th year. So it is possible, as long as you provide that explanation. Okay,
so Monmon, you need to speak to your immigration lawyer and take the advice of the panel. We have another question coming through, also a confidential one. I will be a Canadian citizen soon and I have an ongoing EB3 petition with a recruiter. Can I switch it to a TN instead? So I think the question here is that there was, there's an EB3 petition ongoing and now they want to switch to a TN as they become a Canadian citizen. Is that advisable or should they stick on the EB3?
So I think that these are two different things. The EB3 is a green card, so that should not be interrupted in my mind. And once she becomes Canadian, she can apply for a TN and start working in a TN while the EB3 is pending, as long as she meets all the requirements.
So would that not be considered like dual intent? Like when this person comes through?
It could be, of course, but as long as she can prove that, the intention is to work and eventually go back, and it's all done as part of the job, I think it should be okay. But of course, that question can come up. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. We've got a question here from, so Sapita says, thank you. And you're welcome, Sapita. Keep the questions coming. There was a question also, thanks for the awesome information. I missed the part talking about the length of the TNs. Is it a 1 or a 3 year? So we didn't actually cover this. So thanks for raising this question. Let me talk about the length of the TN.
Actually, I did on the very, it was a half. It is 3. It used to be 1 year, and then a few years ago, they changed it to 3 years at a time.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for clarifying for me too.
But actually, for Mexican nurses, it's still a year at a time. They have to renew it, But for Canadians, it's 3 years. 3
years, okay. All right. So we have a question from El Bra, who says, I'm an Egyptian and ACLS instructor accredited from the American Heart Association, clinical nurse educator for nurse intensive care. Do I have a chance? So I'm not sure, El Bra, if you are a Canadian citizen, but as Carl said, only Canadian citizens would qualify for the TN. But I think that leads me to one of the other questions that I wanted to ask. Maybe Jacob, you can take this one. What are the basic requirements for the TN? We want to just go through that list.
Right, exactly. So just like we said in the beginning, they need to have either a state provisional license from Canada or a nursing degree. And so if they have a nursing degree and no license, they can get a license in the US, like we had the question in the beginning. So just because they have a degree alone will still qualify them if they get the state license in the US. They also need a visa screen before they can get the TN. And of course, the most important requirements, they must be Canadian citizens. It's not enough to be permanent residents. We have a lot of nurses that are permanent residents, and they mistakenly think they can get their TN. So these are and of course, they have to be on the list, and nurses are on the list. Okay. So these are the main requirements.
And let me just clarify for a minute. If some of the nurses maybe don't know what the visa screen is. Mm-hmm. So if you get your nursing degree abroad, in most cases, you have to take a test showing that you're fluent in English. We call it the IELTS or the TOEFL exam. And you have to a group called the CGFNS, the Commission on Graduates of Foreign Nursing Schools, will get your transcripts and show. They have to be convinced that what your degree is, what your educational attainment is equivalent to what a nurse would do in the U.S. And usually it is, because especially Philippine nurses usually had a 4-year degree, while a lot of American-born nurses have a 2-year degree. So that usually works. If you're educated in certain English-speaking countries like Canada, then you're exempt from the English test. But if you're from the Philippines or India or someplace else, you do have to pass the English exam.
Okay. Yeah. So, and just in terms of the English, just to mention, in the old days, I've been doing this for many years. In the old days, many nurses used to take the TOEFL exam. I mean, you can still take the TOEFL exam, but these days it's more common for people to take the IELTS exam. And if anybody is studying for the IELTS, I just wanted to mention that Kinetics have an IELTS support group. It's a free group on Facebook, and you can search it. It's called the Kinetics Swish IELTS group, where we provide free information for people trying to pass the IELTS exam. We have Facebook live sessions, mock exams, pointers and tips. You can put you together with a study partner. So if you are studying for the IELTS, I would highly recommend that you join that group and share that with your friends and colleagues, because it's not an easy exam to get through either. And of course, as Jacob and Carl said, you cannot get the visa screen without the IELTS if you were not trained in English. So I see we're actually out of time, but I'm going to take one more question from Jethro. Hi, Jethro. I actually know Jethro. I'm an ICU RN here in Canada, permanent resident, and I've written and passed the NCLEX in July 2018. I'm Ontario licensed, by the way. I connected with Kinetics because I had plans to move and work in California for good. I have been interviewed by the hospital already. My question is, if I get a job offer, how can I acquire the California license since they need Social Security for my for RN applicants? The hospital will sponsor for the green card, but I will pay for the expenses. Are there hospitals that let their applicants pay for the green card fees? I asked my agency, Kinetics, how I will get my California license, and they said that their licensing team will work for it. As there are RNs that are working in California right now that are directly hired by the employer, please advise. Thank you. So a long question there from Jethro, and I know that you're worried about the California license, and it is a tricky state to get a license in. So just to let you know, we have really thousands of nurses working in California that have navigated that. It is not easy because in order to get a California license, you need Social Security, and you can't get Social Security unless you have the TN. So it is a little bit of a dance to navigate, but we have successfully navigated that many, many times. Jacob and Carl, do you want to add anything about the California board?
Well, I mean, just to give you an example of a workaround, and it changes from time to time, but there are other states like Texas, for instance, that do not require a Social Security. So in very many cases, we'll have the nurse apply for a Texas license, and then once you get the Texas license, you can apply for a California license as a reciprocity, it's called. So that's a one way to work around that.
So, yeah. And sorry, did you have something else, Jacob?
Yeah, it's actually very similar to what some foreign attorneys do. They get a license in a different state that is easier, and then they come to California and they're able to get their bar exam by being already an attorneys in a different state.
And that's where it really can be very confusing if you're an RN in Canada, because every state is different. The requirements are different, and often they change. So, it's not like we do a lot of recruitment into New York, for instance, and there was a certain process. Then more recently, they changed that process. So it is continually changing. And that's where it's really important that you work with a recruitment company and immigration lawyers that specialize in nurse recruitment, and they can help you to navigate that process. Okay, I'm just looking at the time. We are out of time. So thank you so much to Jacob and to Carl for joining us this morning. I think this call was very enlightening for many people. These are questions that we get from nurses every day who live in Canada. And I really want to thank you for your time. Again, thank you to David, the admin of this forum, for giving us this opportunity. I think you really are helping a lot of people by giving everybody the chance to speak to Carl and to Jacob. Please feel free to share this information with your colleagues and friends, as I said, and we wish you all a great weekend, and we will be doing more Facebook Live sessions, and for those of you who missed it, this will be recorded and put into the forum as well. Thank you, everybody.
You guys have a beautiful weekend.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Great.